the Lee Kong Chian School of Business here at Singapore Management University. My name is Tomasz McKenney. I am an assistant professor at the Communication Management Group here at SMU's Business School. And I teach interaction design and design thinking courses as part of our new data design and communication track. And I have the distinct honor to have 4 amazing panelists here with me this afternoon. And by way of introduction, they have a long profile that they submitted. So I thought I wouldn't read those out, but just to give you an idea and to match this year's theme of how much everybody's matching, I underlined some words that they told about themselves. So on my right, there's Tamsin Grolick-Smith, and she is the director of School of X of Design Singapore Council. And she happens to be a leader of this group that is a real-world learning platform to build human-centered design skills while tackling social challenges. So that's very exciting. Next to her is Professor Shendong Zhao, who's from NUS. And amongst the achievements that he lists on his profile, he also works very closely with the industry, which is going to be very relevant for today's conversation. He's a senior consultant with several groups, and we're looking to hear more about that connection from Shen. And to his right sits Kai-Seng Hong, who is the founder and director of Studio Dojo. And amongst the many amazing achievements of his here in Singapore, he helps bring sustained impact and culture change in the way people work, which cannot be better matched to the theme of this year. So thank you very much. And last but not least, we have Ms. Xiong Lim here, who's a senior experience researcher at SP Digital and an adjunct lecturer at NTU. So welcome as well. And I was so touched and loved the way she wrote that she teaches at NTU, to her words, paying the favor forward to the alma mater where she graduated from. So welcome, everybody. What I'd like to start with is I'd like to ask each one of you to please tell us your own journey into interaction design, how it came to be that you are sitting here today, and try to connect it to the education experiences that you had in all. Okay, so Tamsin, would you like to start?
Okay, I'll try and do the abridged version. I feel like I've had an extremely meandering journey. I certainly didn't set out in life to be a designer of any form. I studied environmental science. Environmental science is all around complex ecosystems and understanding how things interact. And it taught me a huge amount about the world. It taught me a huge amount about systems and the knock-on effects and the root causes. It also taught me a lot about human behavior. Human beings, we have the power to create so much positive impact and also the power to really screw things up. Yeah. So it taught me a lot. And I set out thinking I'm going to change the world by solving all our environmental problems. And my first job, so that was my education side, formal education. I went through Imperial College learning how to look at pollution pathways and so on. Not at all designy, huh? And then I moved into local government in the UK, and being a fresh graduate, I thought, yes, I'm going to be treated so well now. I'll be at the top of the tree. No, you go in that nice junior role where you deal with all the worst jobs and the best place to learn. I'm a firm believer, actually, that you need real world experience and formal education. So I went in literally lifting up drain covers and looking at sewage, delightful, listening to barking dogs, and also dealing with, at that time, bonfires. Okay, so in the UK, around this time of the year, we start burning leaves and garden refuse. And the brilliant job I had was the job that no one else wanted, which was to go to houses and say, we've had a complaint about bonfire smoke. Will you please stop burning your rubbish? And it was a strange, this is a strange story, yeah? So, and people would say, yeah, whatever. And nothing ever changed, but I was doing my job and they were being told, and so on and so forth. We had a response. And in my nosy and curious way, I started wandering around the offices in our building and discovered this guy trapped in a little corner on another floor, and he was our sustainability officer. And I said, hi, I studied environmental science and it's human interaction. And he was so delighted someone had come to speak to him. So he started telling me about all his initiatives that he couldn't get off the ground. And one of them, brilliantly, was garden waste recycling. And I said, wow, so if we went to people's homes and got the green waste, they wouldn't need to burn bonfires. He went, exactly, that would be great, Tamsin, but I don't know where these bonfires are happening. So I didn't know what I was doing. I went straight to my head of service and said, I've got an idea. And that's kind of how my journey began, looking for opportunities and understanding people's behaviors and problem solving. And it kind of progressed from there. And I ended up more and more being drawn into projects that were very complex and difficult to solve. And they started very much to bring together environmental challenges and health issues, because the environment and health are very closely linked. And I started increasingly seeing we need to understand human behaviors. We can't start with a solution. We can't keep pushing out a solution that makes sense to us, the organization, which 25 years later is still happening. We need to actually start to understand why people are doing what they're doing and work back from that. So I guess a pivotal part of my career to fast track forward, when I left public sector and I moved into private sector, I went to join the mobile telecoms sector. This was around the year 2000, when there were mobile phone mast protests all across the UK, and they couldn't find a way forward. Everyone wanted to use a mobile phone, no one wanted a phone mast. So my role was to come in and solve that. And we used a human-centered design approach without knowing what it was. And that, I guess, was the beginning of the journey. That's a very abridged version. I know it's quite long, but
Thank you very much. Shen?
That's a very nice story. I'm actually quite similar to you. I don't know where where I would be going in the beginning as well. In my undergraduate school, I actually did my computer science degree and biology degree, a double major. At that time, I just know that I'm interested in human. I'm interested in computers, but I didn't know I'm interested in human-computer interactions. Right? At that time, I don't really know. So when I graduated, I went to the Silicon Valley and I get a job as a coder, as a programmer. And the first thing I realized from that job is that it was exciting the first 3 months, but after that is getting a little bit more mundane and boring, because all you're doing is just maintaining the code and debugging. So I actually wanted to kind of get a bit more excitement in my job. So I get really tired of my coding job. I know that's not something I wanted. So I decided to go for a graduate school. And I joined a school that's teaching information systems, and where I started to get to know a little bit more about interaction design. But after I graduate, I still really don't know where exactly I would be. I only know that where I don't want to be. So, as everybody else, when you don't know the solution, you go continue to study. So I went for a PhD degree. And somehow, I guess I was chosen by chance that my supervisor actually, who is teaching me, she is actually focusing on human-computer interactions. So she saw my profile and she liked it, even though I didn't really researching that before. And then we started to working on that field. And with my 6 years over there, I started to like it more and more. And I think I find a connection afterwards. Right? It is the human side and the computer side that work together will create the best impact. And we all know that we want to look for jobs that you're good at, somebody willing to pay for you, right? And then you should also be quite happy working that this is the kind of three circles that you want to make sure that you're working the middle ground. And I think interaction design is really the field that have all three elements. It has creativity, it has the human side. It also, a field that willing to pay you to actually continue to do that. So I think that's how my journey to looking for a life goal meet with a field that actually suits me the best. And of course, my education played a strong part in that. My PhD degree, without that, I wouldn't be able to teaching here. And then also the undergraduate degrees, as well as my master degrees, all that leads to this journey. So I think that's a kind of a, you cannot really see that from the beginning, but when you're looking back, when you connect the dots, you'll find that, oh, actually, that's what life means. Yeah.
Thank you.
Nice. I think my story is pretty similar. I started in computer science, information systems. Coding was great. I could do it like databases, SQL, security. I think something was missing for me, and I think that was the human bit. And I think it was in my third year that I took the module called Human-Computer Interaction, and oh my God, my mind is like this idea of the gulf of interpretation and the gulf of execution. These things that are invisible. How do you know which button to press, and being able to analyze why people do things? I think I was just, whoa, oh, I want to do this. I didn't know whether people would pay back then, but that was something that I really want to do. And I think, yeah, that's when I realized that, yeah, it seems to be something I want to sort of explore. Yeah.
Okay. I guess mine started from the Neopets era. So I guess it's slightly different. So during the Neopets era, I was a heavy user. I went to learn HTML, CSS by myself because I wanted to customize my storefront at the time. And then moving on, as I progressed in education, I fell in with the geek crowd who all could code really well, but who all couldn't design. And that's when I kind of started designing. And then later in college, I took a really unique course. So shout out to all the information engineering and media folks if you're watching this live stream. So I took that and as well as an economics degree, and I graduated and I realized I didn't want to have anything to do with engineering. Sorry. Yeah. So that's the common theme over there. And yeah, so I just randomly applied for a design job, somehow managed to get in, and this is where I am today.
It's really amazing. There are similarities. I can already tell. Actually, to build up on that a little bit, how do you feel that, when was that realization? I think, Shen, you mentioned that there wasn't a clear driven path, and you know, everybody mentioned that it sort of took you various places. Was there any particular event or a story or a particular place where you felt like you gained strength? You know, the theme is often, we heard it previously on the Tokyo thread and earlier about resilience. So I really want to connect to that. When did you decide to feel that this is, you know, interaction design and this field is where you really want to go, despite all the difficulties, right, that you mentioned earlier? Who wants to take that? If you have a good story for us.
I mean, my examples would be broader than just interaction design, I think, because I look at the more broader experience design. But I guess pivotal for me was truthfully back in those days of the mobile telecoms era. And I mention it because it was a really conflicting time. I'll share with you a brief story of turning up to my first public meeting. I worked for a mobile company, and I'll mention it or the story doesn't make sense. And not to draw them out, but every mobile telecoms company in the UK at the time had similar situations. I worked for a company called Orange, and my first public meeting had about 300 people attending. And I was driving around to try and find the meeting, and I said, I think it's here. And I drove up the driveway, and there was a mob outside, a mob with placards. But the weird thing was they had 3 skeletons with them. I still don't know where the skeletons came from, and each skeleton was holding an orange. And I thought, oh, I think I'm in the right place. And that really didn't feel like a nice place to turn up. And I got out of the car, and people were physically prodding me and being really rude and nasty. And it was the first time I'd ever been to one of these meetings, and saying, you know, I was a baby killer and all horrible things. And I said, wow, this is horrible. I sat in this meeting, and luckily I wasn't leading the meeting, but I sat in there and I thought, this is really horrific. And it was a horrible experience. And it forced me to sit back and think, wow, this is my job. I've chosen to come into this field. How can I help? And I realized, I looked at the people in the audience, and they felt powerless. They were doing what they were doing kind of in survival mode. And there was a real disconnect between what they wanted and what was being offered to them. And it taught me, through desperation, because when you go into a meeting and people prod you in the chest and say you're a baby killer, you're desperate to find a way out of that. Yeah. So that's when I really started trying to understand human behavior and the co-creation approach. That's where we first crudely started using it. I started by breaking down the size of the meeting, and by taking my engineers, and I love engineers, and I love engineering, but engineering is sometimes very logical and doesn't bring the empathy lens in, yeah? So I would take my engineers out on site, and the engineers were concerned that actually the public, they didn't know, they're not in my backyard types, yeah? They just don't like it because they don't want it in their backyard. And I said, that's fine, come and talk to them. And actually by starting to unpack the issues and working them out, things started going very, very well. And what happened was the residents would say, why can't we put a mobile phone mast there? Well, you can't do that because the signal would never get through here. Oh, I get it. And we started this brilliant process of actually designing together. And we ended up eradicating the problem. Truthfully, and I couldn't ever have imagined being at the point where there were no protests, but we literally designed it out, and it became an industry-wide approach. So it taught me that by involving your users, really understanding the barriers, the motivations, and the pains, you can almost solve any problem if you want to. the trouble is not everyone wants to solve it. It's not convenient. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
This actually connects really well to what I heard from you, Shannon. You said that, you know, you were in this geek crowd who didn't want to design anything. So what made you go against the flow? What was that power in you that made to realize that design is the direction that was missing from the crowd you surrounded yourself?
To be honest, in that situation, I think it was just basically like, this is the only person who can do a bit of design. That's why I started doing that a little bit more. So I recognized that, oh, my friends are all really good coders. I'm the worst coder amongst them. So I'll just do whatever's left behind. But yeah, to answer your earlier question of like when there was a pivotal shift in a way of when I felt like this is something that I wanted to do, I think that only came after I started working as a designer and we started shipping things and speaking to the users. And they were like, oh, this thing is amazing. I love it. It really helps me in my work. And I think that like the moment when you know, like, okay, this is gonna be the thing for the rest of my life. Yeah.
Shen, you also mentioned, you know, I mean, I know very many people in Silicon Valley who are developers, and they're very happy in that world. So your experience, you know, may or may not be shared by others, since it's a relatively well-paid job. You know, most of the times what you're doing, what's the expectation. So what made you into a renegade who said like, no, this is not for me. I want something more. So is there a story there more that you can tease out?
Well, I think I'm interested in doing things that's kind of a little bit different and innovative, and I don't want to see something that I can. I guess as an engineer, you wanted to see things that's kind of you shouldn't see too much unexpected things. So you don't want surprises. But I'm someone enjoy surprises. I don't want the life to be like always predictable and just going for a straight path. So when I'm doing interaction design and when I'm doing research projects in this area, like every day I see surprises. Even though maybe I can predict things better and better, but always something surprises me. So from that side, I think the life, you know, it's never boring to work in interaction design. And another thing that kind of make me really convinced to involve in this field is by a talk from Brad Victor. So Brad Victor is a visionary person who works for Apple before, but he come out and he has this vision that we need to change technology to work for human. So technology, if you just let it go by itself without intervening in any ways, it can drive human to a place where we actually sacrifice a lot of our lives. Like imagine the life we have right now. Like you have computers, you have mobile phones, but we almost feel like slaves of these devices, right? You know, you kind of browsing videos 4 hours a day because you cannot stop, right? That's the, you know, that's kind of the technology. And if it's only driven by this, only driven by technology, it can drive human to a place where we may not want to be. And who is going to save us? Designers. We need to be able to come out and then realize that, okay, there are better way to do things, better way to, you know, fit our values and design the path so that we can achieve productivity, also happiness, and in the long run, we'll be happier. So I think when I see that, when I hear his talk, I think that's the place I want to be.
So this is actually a perfect segue to ask. I want to hear this from everybody. So I know for a fact many students of mine or viewers are watching, and they wonder, you know, where can I learn that in Singapore? How can I learn that to be that designer, the guardian of culture, and what is it that you see today in Singapore, and maybe you would suggest for those who are watching, who are early career, considering getting into interaction design, that they can do and become all these ideas that each of one of you here today represents. Khai, do you want to open it up?
Yeah, I think definitely academic grounding is really useful. I would say I was really lucky to have gotten some kind of grounding, even if it's undergraduate level. But I think when you interact with the users live, you learn something totally different. I think I recall my first usability test, and back then I was really just a junior, and we planned for this task 15 minutes. You're supposed to like start to end of the task, pressing submit in 15 minutes. The guy took like an hour. And because I wasn't strong in my facilitation, I really just let this guy just bumble along for an hour. And I could hear like sighs coming from the other side of the room. You know, when it's the one-way mirror and the client is observing. I think that's when I really understood like, oh, wow, yes, there's all this theory you want to learn, but really it's about impacting that poor person who's really struggling and really looking at people and saying, help, I really need help. I really cannot finish this. I think that's really something.
So let me push you on that a little bit. So,
yeah.
so what part of your education was helpful though, right? Because I'm placing myself in the shoes of those who are listening, right? And what you just said resonates to me, and I saw the nods in everybody to say like, yes, the real world is going to be different than what you learn at school. However, your preface said that it was great to learn in school. So what is it that you would encourage the students and the to-be students to learn in order to then be faced with the realities?
I see. Yeah, I think it was Kurt Lewin that says there's nothing so practical as a good theory. And I think being able to learn the theory and then constantly watch for opportunities to apply, I think is the key thing. So it's not really understanding the theory about, you know, interaction design and different models of understanding things. It's constantly trying to apply that. I think when you're out in industry and working, you don't get that theory anymore. At least in my path, you don't really get that rigor anymore. And I really wish more of that can be sprinkled all the way through. Yeah.
How do you, Shen, how do you see that from the point of view of an educator? You've been running interaction design courses for what, 7 years, if I know?
Yes.
How do you see that from that standpoint? What is it that you felt you're giving to the students that enables them to become professionals?
I think what Kai-Sing said is very, very important. It's try to hands-on. So the interaction design course where we teach, we actually get rid of the final exam. It's mostly hands-on and project-based. And where I really encourage them to go out and meet real users. Although that can be difficult, especially during COVID-19. But, but whenever possible, we want them to talk to real users and they have the real experience of doing that and complete the design life cycle. And work on some problems, hopefully is a real problem, not some kind of imaginary problem. So I guess later on we'll talk about that a little bit, like connecting with industry and finding out what kind of problem the industry is having, and then bring some of that into the classroom, and then connect them with the industry researchers or employees and give talks in class, will help them to make that connections. So I think, you know, like you said, it's important to, I think if you teach interaction design, it's very important to really associate with real problems and associate with real people out there. Do it like a very hands-on, and also try to make the process fun. And then the student will actually really want to going further from there. I think that's the key for this class. It's one of the classes that really requires that.
Sheehan, I know you went back to the university to help and give back. So you definitely have the internal drive. What do you feel you bring to the students that you want them to know if they want to be professionals in the field?
Since the students I'm teaching come from the same undergraduate program that I graduated from, I guess what I hope to bring back is the perspective of being able to see from their eyes and what they would look out for. And so my training really was more towards the engineering aspect. But what I felt this engineering program actually gave me was the ability to appreciate the canvas that I work on. And this is what I hope my current students will be able to see when they are going through the course as well, to be able to appreciate the canvas that they're designing for, to be able to understand what design is about with this canvas in mind, and hopefully be able to apply all of this design methods and practices and thinking to all the other problems that they have.
And I know all of you are, we had a little conversation about this earlier, of how you're integrating a systems approach in a more broader level. So I think I recall, Tamsin, you mentioned several times how important it is to look at it from a systems perspective of not just approaching it from a technological standpoint. These are the different methods, these are the disciplines, but really truly have this broader perspective. What advice would you give again for career starters, those who want to get into the field, whether it's interaction design or other design disciplines?
So I think it kind of leads on from the great comments we've heard here, the blend between having a structured set of tools and understanding the complexity of the real world, because the real world is messy. And coming from previously being an educator in NUS, I know that from a teaching point of view, it sometimes can be tempting to say, I'm going to make this simple for you, because then they all think they're an expert and we feel we get great grades, well done. But actually, my concern is then that students don't always know how to apply. And there is that big gap that we graduate feeling we're the smartest people in the world. And then we go to work and think, oh, I know nothing. No wonder I'm dealing with bonfires. Yeah. So there is, I believe that the real world is the richest classroom. And that's where we learn about complexity. And what I feel is the thing I would advise people is to say, embrace ambiguity. I find it's something people really struggle with. I know when I started teaching NUS, everyone would say instantly, what framework are we using? And it's almost like I want to know the checklist of things I need to look for so I can tick them off and then I know I've done it. And I said, no, there's no framework. There's no framework for the future. There's no framework for transformation. It's about building schools, having a set of tools and skills that allow you to grapple with what's coming. And the way I try to teach my students is to make them a bit fed up by forcing them to embrace ambiguity and give them a small amount of the instruction, say, now, what do you think you should do now? And they hate me, yeah? But what we know is that's how we start to learn. And then you come back and you can guide them more. And it's kind of that more iterative approach. So the very approach we use to designing, which is iteration, I feel we should be bringing into the education as well, making them embrace complexity and not fear it. I have had so many very smart people come to me and say, we need to boil this down into something simpler. And then we eradicate the complexity, which actually has potentially very rich solutions in it. So I guess for me, it was an easy journey because I studied in complex systems, but I studied deeper. I went to New York University back around 2001 and had one of the most intense training experiences of my life to learn really about complex adaptive systems. I felt like my brain was bleeding because you have to rethink every approach you've ever taken, but that allowed me then to see things differently. So I always encourage people, systems thinking and complexity is very powerful for whatever area you specialize in.
Yeah, I just want to jump in here. Like, I think back then, all the theory I had was really around digital systems and in terms of interaction design. I wished I had complexity theory and system science. That was a lens that only came to me really recently.
Yeah.
And now I'm like absorbing stuff from like Santa Fe Institute and things like that. So I have to build my own curriculum around complex adaptive systems.
And the other thing is around behavioral science. When you then bring in, so when you've got your complex adaptive systems and that systems lens and you bring in behavioral science, wow, and that's to me where interaction design should be going, really looking at that behavioral angle. But in order to influence positively behavior, we need to understand that wider picture. And so I think it's quite, it's harder, yeah, but more rewarding. Remember, well, we like a challenge, yeah.
You mentioned Santa Fe Institute. I was there for a while, and I
nice.
Remember I actually changed my PhD topic because of that experience of Santa Fe Complex System Institute. But I didn't realize. I went there as a psychology, undergrad, who I thought I'm going to study rats running in mazes and thinking about their. And then I met biologists talking about the same systems and amazing physicists, and we ended up doing agent-based simulations of mice and people running in. So Steinbach was there as well. But, so how's that relate to others who might be watching and thinking, who are already in the field and want to get better at being designers? Like what advice do you guys have on how, for somebody who's already working and maybe doing the same usability tests that you're doing, hopefully not for an hour, but but in that lens, what professional improvements and continuous learning opportunities do they have, particularly here in Singapore? Is there something maybe Tamsin is well suited for you in this question.
Funny you should mention it. No, actually, before I come on to my natural bias, what you just described there is where I feel education has started to go a little wrong. We've become too vertically specialized, and we've lost that renaissance angle, which is that to be brilliant in one field, I need to really broaden the diversity of my lens of experiences. I need to embrace with literature. I need to read Steinbeck and not just Interaction Design Journal. Yeah, I need to broaden that. I need to go to an art gallery and just look at art and think about it. So bringing some of those different diverse inputs in makes us much better designers, and that's not related to the plug I'm about to do.
Please tell us a little bit about what you do these days.
For those of you in Singapore, yeah, so I'm extremely proud to be heading something up for Design Singapore Council called the School of X. Yeah, I am now the X man. And the School of X is deliberately designed to give people that opportunity. It's designed to give designers an opportunity to flex their human-centered design muscles by working with people who have no exposure to it. The way it works is it's a real world learning platform. So we all know that this is where we sharpen our tools. Yeah, we're trying to bring in some of those complex, challenging issues that society is facing. So at the moment, we're working on a very interesting project with the social service sector around all sorts of issues to do with resilience and outreach during this pandemic. In a way, the pandemic has brought to light issues that were bubbling along anyway, but they've just sharpened it. Yeah. So we're running this design program where we're bringing together people from very different backgrounds, these diverse backgrounds, to learn whilst they're doing. So they learn design thinking skills and abilities whilst working together on these challenges. And at the end of the program, they will have designed some kind of project solution. They will be coached during the process so they can actually pilot it out. So in that way, we're creating really usable outputs for these organizations that come on board, but also for everyone involved, be they designers, be they members of public, be they people from within a government agency coming onto the program. They work together, they learn to bring the strengths of each other together and really grapple with the issues that we care about. So it's really bringing design together and showing how design is relevant to everyone's life. And the other phrase I always use is about democratizing design. Yeah, I think for very technical aspects of design, you need to go to university. Yeah, you need to go through a long degree and learn your craft. But actually, there are elements of design you don't need to do that for. And I think that's tremendously empowering. It can unlock solutions. So I'm really trying to say it's relevant to everyone through the School of X. Yeah. So come on board, guys. You come and play with us. Yeah.
Shen, I think this is like a bold, just given up for us. So how can universities, right? You and me and Shane, of course, like how can we answer this challenge if it exists at this amazing opportunity that Tamsin's talking about? How can we enable from the beginning of the pike, like to start people off on that journey that takes them through complexities that then leads them to become, amazing X-Men?
I think what Tamsin is offering is fantastic, School of X. But from the university side, I think now that there's a trend of continuous education, where people can go back to study at different stages of their lives. And I was really inspired last time when someone from Google come to us who give a talk, and she said that she has her own agenda. Like every 10 years, she will go to school to do a degree or something like that, which I think makes a lot of sense. Because when I was working on something, I really don't have the time, because there's just so many things competing for your attention. You don't have the time to sit down to really think about a subject in a very, very deep level. So once you accumulate a lot of experience in your life, you need that much time to actually consolidate that and advance to the next level. So maybe every 5 years, maybe every 10 years, if the opportunity allows, someone can go back to school and spend maybe a few months to a few years there again to study. I think that study will actually bring a lot of value, not only to help your other students to kind of see different perspectives, but also you bring your knowledge to the next level, and you already know what you want to learn. So you will be more focused to learning as well. So I think if we do that, the Singapore society will be stronger, and it will be more competitive to the world economy.
Since you brought up the industry connection. And many of you mentioned it in your introduction, how that is so important to have that connection with the real world and experience with industry and education. So one model, right, that we do is we invite guests. We have conversations that we're hoping that students can learn from. But are there any other models that you have seen that maybe outside of the region, perhaps, or here, that worked really well? So what is that academia industry relationship that you would like to see Singapore moving towards to more of? Xian, do you have a...
I think I can only speak from my own experiences while studying in NTU, actually. So I believe some of my classmates at the point in time were actually doing a lot of attachments or final year projects that had to do with real world problems. Like so again, because I came from engineering, a lot of the projects that they were doing, or a lot of the attachments that they were doing, were more engineering centric, but there was always this design aspect to it. And I found that for my friends who were doing this, they felt that it was helpful in getting them connected to what real world problems there were. So maybe that's something that would be helpful.
Khai, what do you look for when you look at the pie coming through and you're hiring into Studio Dojo? What is it that you're looking for in people coming and knocking at your door? That is it the amazing interaction design course that they attended Shen's course on that, or what are you looking for? What is attractive from you from the standpoint of somebody who's been on both sides of the equation and now sits there in a position of hiring?
I think for me, the interest is in whether they view education as school. It's two different things, right? So you can go, definitely you get more education in school.
Yes.
But if you think of learning, then that's like saying, right, continuing education, and it's lifelong. And the question is then where is the learning taking place? And there's obviously formal learning, like going to the class, sitting down, having somebody who's more knowledgeable share that with you. But there's also informal one, which is casually having chit chat. So what I've seen in the industry is, people, just like 5 people who are from similar backgrounds saying, hey, we don't have anybody to learn from. Shall we just have a WhatsApp group and let's chit chat and let's just have dinner and just learn, exchange war stories? That's also part of learning. So being able to proactively reach out and, connect, I think is quite an interesting way. And there's also the informal ones, which is, conferences, things like IxDD, right? Where you're really learning as you're going along and just taking piecemeal things that are important right at the moment. So I think if you can, I guess I see when people are crafting their own curriculum across and not waiting for learning to happen in the classroom. Yeah. And I really see somebody that's driven and can sustain, that culture of interaction design and thinking about it as a career, I guess.
Yeah. So then the provocative question is that, do we have an environment today here in Singapore that enables that helps and empowers the students to get there? I'm looking at Temsin, particularly help us understand if it is, then it's great, and I think pieces of elements exist. What else can we do? How can we change the design pedagogy to help?
It's an interesting thing. I feel living, because as you can tell by my accent, I'm not from Singapore, but maybe you can't tell. I'm not from Singapore. So the thing that really impressed me when I first moved to Singapore was that there is an appetite for lifelong learning. It's not that school is seen as a burden. When we moved here, my daughter started school, and after a few weeks I said, what do you feel is the biggest difference being at school here compared to being in the UK? And she said, everyone in class wants to be here and everyone wants to learn. And that, she was a young girl and she still identified with that. There's no shame in being top of the class. So I grew up being in the top sets at school, feeling a little embarrassed about that. Oh, it's so embarrassing. Oh, no, I got an A. I'm so embarrassed. It's not cool. Whereas in Singapore, it's cool. So there's a very different mindset, which I think we should leverage. I feel that there is an appetite for people to continue to learn. There's a voracious appetite. And I feel that when Singaporeans want to learn, they race ahead, yeah. But I think it's that at the moment it's very much self-driven, but I feel that ecosystem of that you've described there, Khai, Seng, at the moment it's very informal, and it's great to see things like IxD, the more formal networking opportunities coming together and allowing people to enter into that in different ways. I mean, yes, that's one of the things we'll do with School of X, but there are many different networks in Singapore that are trying to bring like-minded practitioners together. To me, it's all about how do we make this really inclusive and accessible? And I mean that in that broadest sense, so no one feels intimidated, that everyone feels they can play a part, because we learn from diversity. Yeah? So I'm not sure that's a simple answer, but I feel there are many great initiatives happening in Singapore. We're such a tiny country, but we still sometimes don't know about all of it. So how can we get that bit better? Yeah.
So we're going to go shortly to the Q&A. So I'll ask Kia to queue up some questions for us. But I wanted to also ask Shen, you a little bit about, since I know that you're very much the leader, not just here locally, but also strong connections with organizations abroad in the US, in China, and all around the world. Is how does Singapore general measures up to those other communities, and what is it that people look at Singapore as maybe something that is attractive, or maybe something that needs to be grown? So can you give us an example of both of those areas in which you've seen?
So I will maybe first go with what Singapore is attractive. I think sometimes people say Singapore is Asia, beginner for Asia, or so I know, for example, my niece in Canada, right? He wanted to explore more of the Eastern culture, but his Chinese or the other language is not so good. So where does he think as the first place he want to be? He actually thinks Singapore is the first place, because he will have an easier transition, and he can gradually move towards the more Eastern culture if he wanted to. So I think Singapore can be a very good place as a bridge, as a place where when people wanted to transition, and when we want to connect different people together, it's a very good place. But on the other hand, I think Singapore is a little bit isolated in a way. Well, we are quite connected with maybe neighboring countries, but when I talk to my friends in the Silicon Valley, you can see that maybe 10 kilometers away, there's another good school where there's a lot of interaction designers. In just 10 kilometers radius, there's so many good designers, so many good educators you can kind of hang out with. You can have coffee and you can have dinner. Here, I think we pretty much know everybody already. Of course, there's a lot of people we can know more about, but there's a little bit of feeling of this isolation. And if you want to invite anybody over, it's at least 6 hours of flight. So that's even more difficult during the COVID-19 time. But I guess with the digital movement, we can have more of that involved. So I think, I guess we can maybe leverage on the digital movement, so to bring people together, and also take advantage that we have a very good middle ground. It's also the US for beginners, for people from China, probably. So you can have those people to come in here as a place where they can do their work.
Khai and Shane, you guys want to add to that? Go to
yeah, I think I resonate with that, and I think a stronger community will help with that isolation bit. I think as you're constantly just handling more and more Zoom calls continuously, we don't get out as much, sometimes, so I think building that strong relationship, like in terms of systems thinking, relationships and the linkage between different agents is what's key. And I think building that strong relationship and connection would help.
Okay, so let's go to the questions. So Kia, if you're there, could you tell us one of the questions that came in, perhaps?
Oh, can you guys hear me?
Yep, perfect. Thank you. Yep.
Okay, great. Yeah, there are a couple of very interesting questions that came by, and I think we have one here that talks about the learning through actual internship and work experiences seems to be really more helpful for students. But how can we, I think, maybe for people who are breaking into the industry, lend ourselves to the supposed roles in order to apply the theories? That's from Nicole.
I didn't hear the question very
Can you
clearly.
repeat the question one more time just to make sure we capture it right?
So it says that learning through actual internships and work experiences seems to be more helpful for students. But how can we even lend ourselves to the supposed roles in order to apply the theories that was being learned, right? So if I may reframe it, it probably will be more on during school you have internships to sort of give you that work experiences. But I think after you leave school, that's really where the bridge and the gap comes in, right? How do then one really build up what they need in order to land on the road that they really want to?
Yeah, I'd love to hear your answers actually, because there's this meme about, wait, to get the internship, I need experience, but to get experience, I need the internship. And then how do how do you all explain it to your students? Like, I'm curious.
I mean, I don't know. I'm going to jump in very briefly because you know this is me, chatter. Yeah. I was previously at NUS, and it was hardwired into all the programs that we ran in our institute that everyone did a 9-month internship, and that was really seen as extremely powerful and valuable, because how else do you learn how to apply? I ran something there called the Smart Health Leadership Centre, which meant we were placing students into healthcare organisations or healthcare IT organisations, so they really grappled with an extremely complex environment and took all that theory and say, yeah, I'm a software engineer, oh my goodness, I've got no idea how to deal with this, as they had to grapple with many complexities. So more and more programs now, and I would advise students that haven't yet enrolled into a program to really look for those programs that are offering the internships, and many more degrees now are being offered in this stackable form, so it's broken up in a different way, and there's School of X, but anyway. Yeah.
Shin, how did you manage that, in your own personal experience? And can you help us?
I think, okay, I would first say that I think it is difficult to find that right internship or the right attachment, for sure. What I did for myself back at the time, many years ago, okay, not that many, hopefully, a couple of years ago, was basically being extremely shameless. So I basically listed out a whole bunch of websites. I emailed all of the owners of all those companies that I saw. And I just emailed one by one, and I customized a letter for each and every single one of them, eventually until someone accepted me and he was like, hey, okay, you seem really desperate for an internship. I'll speak to you. and that was actually how I landed my own internship at the time, which was actually for a game design company. So it wasn't even for interaction design. But yeah, I did it again after, I did it like a couple of times. Basically, I was always really desperate and emailing a whole bunch of people, spamming them. So I guess that was one way. I think another way that might be possible now might be to join a lot of the communities that are being formed, UXSG, IxDA, all of those communities, where it might be a good venue to just listen out for what opportunities there are available. And when you hear of any, just like, hey, try me.
I don't know if we should use the word perseverance rather than desperation for what you did, because I think that's an admirable thing, and I think we should attach positive labels to that.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I keep interrupting, I know, but there's a very interesting point that you drew out, coming from the perspective of someone who I used to have 4 intakes of interns a year coming to work with me, and I would receive many applicants. I read every single one, and I shortlisted based on the application letter. Yeah. So the fact that you made the effort to tailor it is a huge thing, because you won't believe the number that won't do that. And the ones that were shortlisted for an interview with me were the ones that really understood what I was looking for. And then they came and they learnt so much and they gave so much. So when you're doing the internship, you will get out of it as much as you put in. And that starts with the application letter. So I just wanted to jump in there.
I'm so glad you said that. The way I got my my postdoc at Stanford is because I actually ambushed my professor at the parking lot. I didn't actually have a postdoc lined up, but I said that, and I said, I'm going to come to your lab from the coming week, and I just want you to know. And he was actually very cool about it and said, yeah, sure, it's usually Tuesdays at 3 p.m. when we meet.
Awesome.
And for 6 months, I went to Stanford without a work authorization or any other any other way. So I think that's exactly a story that you shared with us.
And also no pay, because I think the other thing is, if you're prepared to do a free internship, they're more likely to listen, but not everyone is. So that's another matter.
Interesting.
Yeah. Anyway.
You had any other questions, maybe?
Yep, there's one that's pretty interesting that came out, I think, from Tamsin's sharing on the story at Orange. we can really see that there are many different ways to design or problem solve, right? Apart from digital products, what could be the other industries or roles that we designers can engage in order to like problem solve, right? Or even through user research.
So it's been a very interesting year for me as I joined Design Singapore Council during circuit breaker. And I joined Design Singapore Council to drive something that was looking at social impact. And I'll be honest with you, I thought, well, this is terrible timing, huh? Everyone's in survival mode. No one's going to care about social impact. And I was just overwhelmed with how much desire there is, how much this pandemic has brought even more strongly out the desire to create a positive impact. My strong belief is that the healthcare sector will just keep growing. So anyone look at the potential there for interaction design is phenomenal. And I would urge a looking beyond just the product, just that interface angle, and really looking broader in terms of how we can use design to help influence positive behaviors. Across healthcare around the world, all healthcare systems, the demand is only growing, and so increasingly they're looking at preventative health as well as healthcare, and starting to understand that bigger picture and design solutions that enable that big impact. There is huge potential there. You will be highly in demand. The other one that will grow, in my opinion, is around environmental impact, because like it or not, we know we can't avoid looking at that anymore. I'm coming from someone who trained in environmental science back in the 1990s. That's how old I am. The same issues are still being discussed. We've made virtually no progress. And in fact, if you go back to Rachel Carson in the 60s, oh, dearie me, we've made no progress since then. I feel that we're starting to see a desire for people to say that this more values-driven consumerism approach. People are more willing to say, I want certain service and product expectations to be met, and part of that is around values. I want stuff to be ethical. I want it not to have an environmental impact, and I want it to be good for society, and maybe even me. We put ourselves last year. So I feel that those two areas actually will continue to grow, particularly on the healthcare side.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to build on your point. I think with simple problems or complicated problems, you are designing 10 form fields into one mobile screen. Problem solving, I think, is a good way to think about it. When you move into complex systems, the class of problems can't really be solved. There's like, when you're talking about big human systems with multiple interconnected systems, there's really nothing you do that you solve it. That if it's complex, you can't fix it. Yeah. Like, it's not something you fix. And I think moving away from the idea of problem solving to, and I think in like OD and other fields, you talk about interventions. So you interject interventions in, you see what happens, and then you tweak from there. You're just not having the hubris to say we're going to solve like poverty or climate change.
Correct.
Like
absolutely,
it's not a problem.
And the way I try more to position it is around working towards outcomes. So what are our desired outcomes, rather than how do we fix the problem? Because when we fix the problem, it is almost like I'm taking the hammer and I'm going to bang the nail. Whereas when we say how do we create a certain outcome, it makes us think in a different way. So I think, yeah, it's a slightly different lens.
Kiet, maybe we have time for one or two more questions.
Yep. We have a couple of minutes more for one or two questions. And I think one that probably connects well with this is then, as leaders in the design space, how can we actually raise this level of design literacy to a wider industry, right? Because right now, as you probably already know, there are only certain industries that's really using design, whether as a problem solving or as a way of improving the way the industry works. But I think there are rooms for other industry to do so, and perhaps any ideas or thoughts on how we can raise that level.
Xian, you're working for a utility company. Tell us a little bit about that, because it's not a trivial thing. So,
but I must say a lot of the credit for raising that design literacy in the utilities company that I work for didn't land on me. So when I joined the team, the company is already pretty advanced. So my team, shout out to my manager if she's watching this. I think my team has been trying very hard to prove design's worth through a lot of conversations, a lot of collaboration. They try to make their work speak for themselves. So I think like that's always been the way that my team has been doing things. I think that's like the most impactful thing we can be doing by showing that design methods get you results that you want. Yeah.
I entirely agree. I think it's about, it's not, if we start promoting design for the sake of design, we're forever persuading each other that we're brilliant, yeah. Whereas we need to resonate with the leaders. We need to let the results. I love the phrase you use. We need to prove design's worth. Yeah, it's absolutely the truth. So when I've worked on many projects, I don't even mention design. I talk about creating desired outcomes or overcoming particular challenges, and then you can tell them about it afterwards.
Thank you. Another question, Kid?
Yep, there's one from Shanna. Bear with me if this question didn't connect well, as I'm trying to interpret it as well. What is your opinion towards simplifying what is being taught in relation to complex problems? Does it help students understand what the real world is like, or does it give a surface view that doesn't really help us?
Yeah.
This may be a tension between what was being taught and what's in the real world, right?
I think if I can jump in this one, this is a great question, because I empathize with a point of view of a student who may be watching us and thinking, oh gosh, these experts telling me to go and study complex systems. I don't even know what complex systems is to start off with. That's not a course that I can take. What should I do? So I think it's a very fair criticism to us to make sure that we give not just a high level, this is what we see, but really tangible and actionable advice. Shen, you haven't mentioned anything lately. So what is the hardest advice?
No, I think this is a really tough question, but I think if you wanted to tackle that, I think what people usually do is you need to be able to decompose, divide and conquer, right? You need to be able to see from a complex, systems, where are the things that you can kind of divide it into smaller systems. And likely you can divide a bigger system into a few subcomponents. And then you can further divide them, and you further divide them. No matter how complex it is, you can kind of divide them up into smaller pieces. If you can have that skill, and then you will be able to at least solve some part of it. Like some of the connections we don't really understand, and they have interaction effects that's really difficult to understand, which you may not be able to solve. But if you're able to decompose, right, then it will give you a way to approach problems. And that's how we approach life as well.
So how does that materialize? So what does that mean when you're passionate about, like I am, about climate change, right? It's a topic I'm infinitely passionate about. What is it that I can do? That's a complex system, one of the textbook ones. What can I do? What is it that I can go for as a designer or somebody who wants to be a designer?
Well, I think that's, of course, very hard. I mean, that's a huge system. That's really huge.
He's getting the worst questions today. I mean, I feel you should.
But I guess you can always think that, based on what you're able to do, there's a few things maybe sizable that you can start with your home, right? Start with yourself, whether I can stop, using plastic bags, or, see some inspirational approach other people did that I can apply to myself. I can convince my family. I think it's important to realize how complex the world is, but it's also very important to realize that we always start with small. Like, whenever a student comes into my lab, the first thing I need to teach the student is that think small. You cannot think too big. If you think too big, you will be just reading literature reviews for years without even be able to do anything, right? To be able to scope down to something really small and workable in a few months is the key to get things started.
If I can jump on that, actually, because although I do the opposite, I say start big. I'm your worst teacher, think big. But actually, there are a number of tools that can help you break big down into simple. And one of the ones that I use, and it's not a particular design tool, it's actually more from the social impact space, is the logic model. And it starts by allowing you to connect the dots between the desired big level impact, climate change, whichever angle of climate change you want, and the challenge on the ground. And it breaks it down into desired outcomes that might look like success. And from that, you can choose one of those outcomes and say, right, what could I do to start to work towards that? And from that, I can identify and scope out some individual projects. So I can't solve climate change overnight, but I can say, wow, this little thing I'm doing is part of a bigger picture. So I always say, think big, think about that big desired impact you want to create, and then effectively reverse engineer back to scope out a project you can design around.
Yeah.
Thank
just
you,
jump in.
everyone. I think I see that we have to give up the stage soon. So I just wanted to thank all four of you for coming here today. I learned a lot just through this conversation. And thank you so much for Kiat and everyone at IxDA for organizing and having this available.
No problem. It's such a pity that I'm not there, and usually I will be the one that is sitting on your seat. I'm so thankful that you guys are doing it over there. Yeah, please carry on the conversation. There is a breakout room, remember, for those of you who are in the chat that would like to carry on the questions, that there are many that wasn't being answered. Feel free to head into the breakout room and take the conversation forward. And I will move on to the next session. So thank you, Thomas, and thank you all the panelists.
Bye.
Thank you.